It's easy to look at the Vargulf on paper and not be particularly impressed. I mean, the weapon strength is really not great. Armor is very poor. Stats are alright. Speed is fantastic, actually, at 80 speed, but it kind of belies the fact that Vargulfs are an exceptionally strong monster for the cost, especially being a staple of Vampire Count's play. Any Vampire Count main can tell you. Today, the Emperor is facing off against said Vampire Counts, coming in with the Dread Zombie Column Formation, Vlad von Karstein, along with some Vargheists. He's got some Fellbats up in the air, some Necromancers, Skeleton Warriors to back him up, the Necromancers being on Corpse Carts, of course, both of them on just the regular Corpse Carts. And, yeah, the Vargulfs as the final nail in the coffin, so to speak. Direwolves also out to the flanks to try and chase some routing units. For the Emperor's Dwarfs, he's got a Lord here, some Thunderers. I know that sounds wrong to say the Emperor's Dwarfs, right? But anyway, Longbeards, Dwarf Warriors, Miners with Blasting Charges, pretty well spread here. One thing, it can be a little bit tricky to protect something like Thunderers in a matchup like this, where they have access to zombie summons and other ways to easily tie down your ranged units. You know, you've got bats, other such things here. But back to the Vargulfs. So again, the weapon strength in particular is not very impressive. That doesn't show, though, that the Vargulf has a really good attack rate. 205 armor piercing means that almost all of this damage is, you know, a very vast majority of it is armor piercing, right? Of course, also has access to the regeneration trait, which, when stacked with other Vampire Count's passive healing, can make this thing surprisingly hard to kill. 42 melee defense is also not too bad. With 50 charge and 80 speed, it also can cycle charge pretty effectively. And just in general, the cheap cost, it's only, what, 1,300 points? For a monster, that's really not much to pay for a big terror-causing, especially fast attack monster, right? There's not a lot of ground fast attack monsters. There's a few, but the Vargulf's definitely, I would say, probably the best in that very limited class. Hard to say, but Vlad's going to get in here. Blasting charges being used on the zombies, which is actually, I think, what the Vampire Count's player wants, is for the zombies to absorb that value. It'll be hard for the miners to accrue a lot of value outside of that. Not that there's any really great targets for their blasting charges to go after anyway, although the blasting charges do deal fire damage. If you can concentrate them on a Vargulf, they could perhaps deal some damage. Maybe throwing into these Vargheists would have been a good idea as well, but the Vargheists are going to come in and start to smash these miners. Thunderers are in such a position that they can provide some Overwatch fire here, so it's not all doom and gloom for the Dwarf folk, but just mostly doom and gloom for these particular miners here. They did manage to cut through those zombies, though, so there's that. The Direwolves just kind of hanging out in the vicinity. There's no artillery crews for them to go after, which is the best targets for them in this type of situation, but they are still going to come in and at least try and interrupt those Thunderers. The Dwarfs also, in terms of deployment, are in a little bit of a rough patch because they're kind of on this low ground trying to fight uphill into the Vampire Counts, who are able to advance on somewhat of a downhill slope. It's not super impactful, but Vlad takes a big old volley there. Let's see, Concentrated Thunder Fire could end him rightly here, but it looks like this other unit of Thunderers is going after the Vargheists. He blows himself up, though, trying to help the Thunderers out by doing some miscast damage, summoning some Skeleton Warriors. I don't think that was worth the miscast damage that he took, but at the very least now, pressuring these Thunderers away. Same thing, Direwolves coming in here, getting mopped up by Slayers, but still just forcing those Thunderers to move, which is enough to protect Vlad for the time being. But the Vargulfs are slowly going to grind through the front line, especially with that Necromancer, giving them the Corpse Cart effects, just that extra little bit of melee attack and defense. Helps them sustain, especially against a lower attack faction like Dwarfs. Unless they fight something like Slayers in melee or face concentrated missile fire, they're really not in too much danger of, you know, crumbling or taking enough damage to even get to crumbling, probably. So anyway, Vlad's going to get in here, start to wreck these Thunderers, just deliver lots of vengeance to the foul Dwarves shooting bullets at him. Definitely not fair at all. This death ball of vampires here in the center is quite strong. You've got all these Graveguard as well. Well, the one Graveguard at least that I failed to notice earlier. That with their anti-infantry bonus, again, that little bit of a bonus, just puts them up to 41 melee defense with the Vigor Mortis effect from the Corpse Carts. That much extra melee defense just helps them grind, and they can act as a fantastic anvil, you know, besides all the zombies and skeletons and everything else that are also meat shielding. for the Vargulfs, but you can see here the rest of the Dwarven army just kind of slowly grinding down Vampire Council units, as to be expected. Vlad's also in a terrible position out there in the back line, probably going to get taken out, but you see, I wanted to highlight this, how the Slayers are really not able to get in contact with the Vargulfs. This is one advantage of monsters fighting with infantry support, is oftentimes they won't get surrounded. You know, they can kind of fight on the front line of their own infantry and only come into contact with a handful of enemy models at the same time. Vargulfs tend to jump around a bit, though, so they probably will get surrounded at some point, but they'll probably dive back into their own lines even as well, so it's all good at the end of the day. Vlad, though, is not good. I think we actually did... No, he's still alive, actually. He's still running around chasing Thunderers till the end of his days, which should be rapidly approaching. We'll see. Dragonback Slayers is trying to shadow these vargheists. The Gulfs both get out of the infantry support, though, and are going to use the speed and mobility. Of course, they don't have to fight in a blob. They can, certainly, and they're decent at it, but the mass also, as well, is an interesting one. Vargulfs can get bullied a little bit by heavier type monsters. They tend to get knocked around. Sometimes that can prevent them from taking damage, though, which is a benefit rather than a curse, but they do suffer from that. Sometimes they won't get the attacks you need them to because they're just getting bullied, but here they're definitely going to get the attacks that they need to. Grinding down these Longbeards. Don't have a lot of infantry support, but a handful of crumbling skeletons trickling in, at the very least distracting here. And again, it's not like the Longbeards, Dwarf Warriors here, have enough attack to really get through the 42 melee defense very efficiently, right? The Vargulf's melee defense is just high enough that, especially in this matchup, the Dwarfs will struggle to make contact. Again, outside of, like, Slayers. Dwarf Lord, obviously, with his 50 melee attack, even still doesn't have that great of a hit chance. Certainly better. He can come in with that 420 weapon strength, definitely deals some significant damage there. You can see that the Vargulf suffering, but Vargulf, of course, much, much faster. Just pops his charge bonus, runs over, and starts to take out those Thunderers, so we'll see. This Vargulf's a little bit overextending, though, perhaps. Definitely isolating himself. And sorry, guys, this encoder decided to jump out the window again. Anyway, yeah, this other pocket of dwarfs here has been left somewhat isolated, and yeah, you can see the Necromancer still supporting, but the Graveguard, all these other units are slowly getting ground down. Slayers are also involved in this fight, which they definitely need to be out. Again, shadowing these Vargulfs. The Dragonback Slayers have just... what did they get off to? They're somewhere around here. Yeah. I guess fighting Vlad. Yeah, they got bogged down with some Skeleton Warriors here as well, so it's a tough situation to be in, but this is pretty ideal for the Dwarves to be able to fight the Vargulf with the Lord, a little bit of minor support, a little bit of Thunder fire from multiple directions, gonna debuff the leadership significantly. Vargulf still not crumbling, though, and still just a giant pain to have to deal with. You know, the runes of slowness, smoke bombs from the engineers are super important to try and control movements of units, and I don't know, with dwarfs, I think, with most factions in general, but with dwarfs especially nowadays, I think you want to fill all of your hero slots, even if it's just with Thanes with no items. I mean, in the late game, the Thane plus 2 Thanes plus a Lord is a tough nut to crack for the vampire counts, especially without Vlad, as Vlad is, yeah, still around technically, I guess, but he's way out in the distance and taking a bunch of damage. And, yeah, I mean, him 1v2 or 1v3 versus dwarf characters is not going to go great. Likewise, the Vargulfs, you know, 2v, even 2v3, or obviously 1v2 or 1v3 is not going to be great versus dwarf characters as well. So I think it would have benefited the Emperor. He is my patron after all, so I'll give him a little bit of coaching here. Just from an army composition perspective, anytime you're playing dwarfs, you do want to max your hero slots, I think. And in a matchup like this, you know, it would have been nice to have runes or Engineer or Thane, any of the three, honestly, could have benefited you. The runes, the Thane in particular does have an AoE weakness to fire item. Not that you really have a lot that does fire damage here, but could be nice to synergize with, I don't know, maybe blasting charges, maybe you take the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. The Dragonback Slayers also have an effect, right, that confers a little bit of extra weakness to fire, so you definitely can get some synergy there and really multiply the fact that the Vargulfs are already weak to fire and really just stack all those effects on top of each other. But the leadership's not amazing. Of course, they are undead, which means the leadership is not nearly the same issue as it is for every non-undead faction. They're just going to crumble, right? And especially given the regeneration trait, meaning that they will crumble even slower. But once Vlad goes down here, that's definitely going to be leadership issues. This other Vargulf, though, you can see basically full health coming back in the late game from the rear of this engagement. Very brutal stuff. Just absolutely nasty. We'll see. Dwarfs, Emperor trying to make his final stand. The Lord himself is also quite healthy, so if he has to fight Vlad and the Vargulfs at the same time, though, again, coming back to single entity combat, 2v1, 3v1 is definitely going to be bad for the Dwarf in that situation. So we'll fast forward a little bit as the Vargulf gets chased after by the big old blob of Dwarven infantry. Eventually the Lord comes forward. He's going to make a stand here, try and take out these Necromancers, which is actually probably a good idea. The Necromancers do have 300 weapon strength, though. Again, in that single entity fight, they do count as actual single entities, unlike regular corpse cards. They can get some attacks that, while they're not going to be super impactful, they'll deal some damage. You can see the Dwarf Lord has taken some damage. Master of Beguilement and Vlad's Terror leads to him getting terror routed, which is most unfortunate. The Slayers will continue to hold, though. Probably be able to finish off those Necromancers, hard to say. But the Vargulf, again, even from that horrible situation earlier, has been able to recover. And that's the nice thing about Vargulfs, is the speed and the survivability means that even if you ham-fist them pretty badly, as long as they don't fully die, you can just about always recover them. They're somewhat squishy in certain situations, but the survivability, recoverability, the speed combined with the regeneration, and the fast attack rate also means that low weapon strength is kind of a little bit of a lie, let's be honest. It's slightly misleading, perhaps, in terms of the actual damage output, because you can see, I mean, this guy's just swinging away. We'll get in close and hope that my encoder doesn't jump out the window again, and just watch. I mean, he's got some matched attack animations where he's going to pick up some dwarf dudes and throw them around, but in general, of course, as soon as I start talking about his fast attack rate, he chooses not to. But there we go. That's two pretty fast attack intervals for a monster. And, yeah. Just brutal stuff. Vargulf's a very brutal monster. Big, angry, fluffy puppy. Eating some dwarfs. Nice matched animation there in the distance. I haven't made a specific video about it yet. I'm going to do a separate announcement. But by the way, as an aside, our very own Xiphos, yes, that's right, the multiplayer monster, tournament beast, veteran Xiphos, is actually also an animator. I had no idea, but he's a man of many talents. He's actually working on a mod. You guys may have seen a post on Reddit where there was a war dancer with some matched animations against a Savage Orc Biggin, which is an interesting combination. It may seem a little bit odd to regular players, but, if you played multiplayer, you're like, oh yeah, that actually, yeah, I could see that. Anyway, he's doing an animation mod, right, for some matched animations for just whatever. So if any of you guys have any animating skills or modding skills, comment down below. I'll kind of direct you where to go. But anyway, I just kind of brought it to my attention. Thanks to the Emperor, though, for sending in a loss. Not everyone is willing to do that, but it's an interesting one. I do think, from an army composition perspective, you had a lot of the tools that you needed. Thunderers were able to even still generate pretty good value, but, I don't think it would be a lot to say, cut something. I mean, we'll have to look. Thanes, even naked Thanes, are only like 500-something, 600-something points. So it wouldn't take a lot. Maybe even just cut like one Dwarf Warrior and one couple of Miners, maybe one charge of this regular one. You could probably afford to bring a Thane, maybe even two. Something like that wouldn't be that hard to try and squeeze in here. But anyway, yeah, a lot of the stuff will kind of overperform in terms of value, right? Because vampire counts tend to do that with their passive healing, overinflate values. But the Vargulfs come in and clean up some really nice damage. They also tank quite a bit of damage. This one, 95 kills, only 800 damage value, but almost completely healthy at the end game, whereas the rest of this army is destroyed, right? Same thing, this Vargulf actually does pay for itself. 10,000 damage dealt, 1,500 rather, damage value. Could you imagine 15,000 damage value? I could, but anyway. Yeah, also very healthy into the late game. The Vargheists here, one of them, 131 kills, 1,600 damage value, also fantastic. Those AP flying units can be very good against the Dwarfs. All you need is like one or two good charges on Thunderers, and you pretty much paid for yourself. Anyway, interesting game. Yeah, Vargulfs are nasty for so many different factions to deal with. Real quick, I just want to check for the Emperor's sake, again, because he's my patron here. Yeah, again, the Thane with nothing is, yeah, 500 points. So it wouldn't be that hard to just even drop a couple of Dwarf Warriors and bring a couple of Thanes in that would have benefited you, and you might have been able to make a stand. Again, a little bit of RNG factor there in the late game in those single entity fights. But anyway, getting back to the topic at hand, Fluffy Puppy Vargulfs. Only 1,400 points. Really not bad at all. You consider kind of other sort of fast attack, arguably light monsters, right? I mean, you've got like the Skaven Broodhorror, to me, is the most comparable one that springs to mind. And the Broodhorror is significantly cheaper. Technically, it has more weapon strength, but again, I feel like the attack rate means that the Vargulf actually has much better DPS. The sustained combat stats also, considering that this is an undead unit and it won't rout, I mean, that's a huge difference, right? The fact that it has literally better attack and defense, and it's also undead, I mean, it's going to be just much, much better in combat overall. Because of that, lower charge bonus, lower speed, but still, much better access to healing, even though, yes, the Broodhorror does have regeneration also, and can heal some from the Clan Molder effects. Obviously, I mean, this guy's got Corvus cards, he's got Mortis engines, lore of vampires, necromancers, all sorts of different stuff topping him back up. So really, honestly, one of the best kind of mid-level monsters in the game, in my opinion. Super, super strong, and definitely something to watch out for any faction playing against the Vampire Counts. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button every time I upload a new video. You'll be notified. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.